Amber Hagerman was only 11 when her name became a national headline, but it wasn't fame she found. It was fear, horror, and heartbreak. In just 8 minutes, she was taken from a quiet neighborhood, seen by a single witness, and then vanished without a trace. Days later, her lifeless body appeared in a shallow creek, and with it a chilling mystery that still haunts investigators decades later. Who took Amber? Why was she targeted? And how did the man who likely killed her simply disappear, leaving behind nothing but a name scribbled on a child's list and a nation forever changed? January 13th was supposed to be a regular Saturday in Riverside Heights, a quiet town where neighbors knew each other by name, and children still played outside until the streetlights came on. The air was brisk but not bitter, and a light gray. Sky cast a soft shadow over the familiar streets. Inside the Hagerman home, 11-year-old Amber was full of energy. She was the kind of girl who couldn't sit still for long, always curious, always looking for her next little adventure. That afternoon, she had one goal in mind: to ride her pink bicycle around the old abandoned grocery store parking lot just a few blocks away. Amber's younger brother, Ricky, went along with her. The lot had become a kind of unofficial playground for local kids, a wide, cracked expanse of concrete, perfect for riding bikes and doing wheelies. It was worn down and ugly, but it felt like freedom. Amber and Ricky rode together for a few minutes before he decided to turn back. She waved him off, saying she wanted to stay just a little longer. It was still daylight, the neighborhood was familiar, and the lot wasn't far from home. There seemed to be no reason for concern. At 4:37 p.m., Amber was seen by a neighbor pedaling in circles, her long brown hair flying behind her. Less than 10 minutes later, her bicycle lay alone on the ground. She was gone. It happened in complete silence. No one heard a scream, no one heard tires screeching. But there was a witness, a 78-year-old retired mechanic named Jim Baines, who lived across the street. He saw a black pickup truck pull into the lot and come to a quick stop. He watched a man, masked and quick, jump out, grab Amber, and force her into the vehicle. Then the truck tore away, disappearing down the street. All of it took less than 8 minutes. By the time Jim ran to call the police, there was nothing left but an empty bike and a terrible silence. The police arrived swiftly. They interviewed Jim, cordoned off the lot, and began searching the area. Amber's mother was inconsolable, screaming her daughter's name into the wind. But Amber didn't answer. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Officers knocked on doors, questioning neighbors and collecting any security footage they could find, but it was already too late. The crucial window had passed. News of the abduction spread quickly, first through the neighborhood, then across the entire town. Volunteers poured in to help search, combing through backyards, ditches, and abandoned buildings. Flyers with Amber's photo, bright eyes and a wide smile, were posted on every corner. The entire community came together, driven by fear and desperation, trying to undo the horror of what had just happened. But the truth was unavoidable. In a quiet town, on a quiet day, Amber Hagerman had disappeared in broad daylight, and it only took 8 minutes. The first hours after Amber's disappearance were chaotic, filled with confusion and rising panic. Police scrambled to gather any information they could from the lone eyewitness, Jim Baines. His account was clear: a black pickup truck with no license plates, a masked man, and a swift, silent abduction. He described the truck as being older, perhaps a late 70s or early 80s model, with peeling paint and a dent in the driver's side door. The detail about the missing plates was especially troubling. It meant the abduction wasn't spontaneous. It had been planned. Officers canvassed the area, asking if anyone else had seen the truck or the man driving it. But nobody had. No security. Cameras caught the vehicle's movement. It had entered and exited the area in less than 2 minutes, like a shadow that never truly existed. With no video evidence and no other witnesses, the investigation hit a wall almost immediately. Amber had vanished in the middle of a neighborhood full of homes, yet no one else saw a thing. Investigators released a composite sketch based on Jim's description. Local news stations ran the story constantly, urging anyone with information to come forward. Hundreds of tips flooded the hotline, but none of them led anywhere. People reported black trucks seen days before, strangers loitering near schools, even unrelated custody disputes. All of it was followed up, and all of it led nowhere. Meanwhile, the Hagerman family faced a different kind of torment. The not knowing. The hours dragged into the night. Search parties formed, combing through wooded areas, drainage ditches, and abandoned structures. Helicopters flew overhead with infrared scanners. K9 units traced the scent from the parking lot to the curbside, where it disappeared. It confirmed what Jim had said. Amber was taken by vehicle, and after that there was no trail. The FBI joined the case within 24 hours. Profilers were brought in to study the abduction, the swiftness, the planning, the lack of ransom or contact. It all pointed to a predator, someone who had possibly watched Amber before, someone familiar with the neighborhood, who knew how to get in and out without being seen. The idea that the abductor could have been watching her, waiting for the right moment, disturbed even the most seasoned investigators. Media coverage turned national. The community was gripped by fear. Parents kept their children inside. School attendance dropped. Strangers were treated with suspicion. A creeping sense of paranoia settled over Riverside Heights. Nothing felt safe anymore. Yet despite the scale of the investigation, there was nothing to move it forward. No fingerprints on Amber's bicycle, no trace DNA, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the abductor had vanished into thin air, just like Amber. The lack of progress was agonizing. People began to speculate wildly. Was it someone from out of town? A known offender? A copycat? But without evidence, all they had were questions. And every passing hour without an answer deepened the nightmare. 4 days after Amber's disappearance, hope was beginning to wane. The round-the-clock searches had produced nothing but exhaustion and frustration. The tips that once flooded in slowed to a trickle, and despite national coverage, no solid leads emerged. People were beginning to fear the worst, even if they weren't ready to say it out loud. Amber's face still stared out from flyers taped to windows and telephone poles, her smile a painful reminder of what had been lost. Then, on the afternoon of January 17th, a dog walker made a gruesome discovery that shattered any remaining illusions of a happy ending. In a shallow creek behind a small apartment complex just a few miles from where Amber was taken, the body of a young girl was found floating face down in the cold water. The scene was immediately sealed off. Police arrived within minutes and confirmed what everyone feared. It was Amber Hagerman. She had been murdered. The location was shockingly close to the neighborhood, too close. Investigators had searched the general area just days before. The implication was chilling. Amber's body had not been there the entire time. She had likely been placed there recently, possibly just hours before she was found. It was a deliberate act. Someone had wanted her to be discovered. An autopsy later revealed that Amber had been kept alive for at least 2 days following her abduction. She had suffered bruises and cuts, but the cause of death was a deep slash to the throat. The brutality of the act stunned even veteran officers. It was violent, calculated, and deeply personal. The question that haunted everyone was the same. Where had she been held during those 2 days, and why was she killed when she was? The surrounding area was combed over again with renewed urgency. Police searched every vacant building, every shed, every basement, within a 10-mile radius. They interviewed hundreds of residents, hoping someone had heard something, cries for help, the sound of a truck late at night, anything. But no one had. It was as if Amber had been kept in complete silence, hidden away where no sound could escape. The creek, once a quiet and overlooked strip of nature behind the apartment buildings, had become a crime scene that would never be forgotten. It was a calculated dump site. Public enough to guarantee she would be found, but just secluded enough that the killer could slip in and out without detection. The familiarity of the spot was troubling. Whoever had done this knew the area. This wasn't random. As news of the discovery spread, grief overtook the town. Candlelight vigils were held. Strangers cried together in parks and churches. The community, once full of hope, now faced the crushing weight of loss. But for investigators, the discovery brought more questions than answers. The killer had made some mistake. He had returned Amber's body. That was risky. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was pride, or maybe he wanted to remind everyone that he had done this and gotten away with it. In the wake of Amber's death, the investigation entered a new phase, darker, more desperate, and marked by growing frustration. Now that police had a crime scene, a body, and a clearer timeline, they hoped the killer had left something behind. Forensic teams examined every inch of the creek bed, collecting soil samples, vegetation, and fibers from Amber's clothing. Her shoes were missing, and so were some of her personal items. The absence of those small belongings was haunting. It felt intentional, as though the killer had taken trophies or was erasing parts of her identity. Despite extensive forensic work, there was no usable DNA, no fingerprints, no hair, nothing. The investigation widened. Detectives looked beyond the immediate area for any similar cases, hoping a pattern would emerge. That's when they discovered something unsettling. 5 years earlier, in a nearby town just 20 miles away, another young girl had vanished under eerily similar circumstances. Her name was Madison Lee. She had been 10 years old, abducted while walking home from a friend's house. She, too, had been found days later in a drainage ditch. Same method, same kind of wound. No killer ever found. The comparison between the two cases wasn't just a coincidence, it felt like a blueprint. Profiles were developed. Experts in criminal behavior were brought in. They believed this wasn't the work of a first-time offender. The abduction was fast and controlled. The killer took precautions. No license plate, a mask, a clean escape. The drop site was chosen with precision. This was someone who had done this before. Maybe not often, but at least once, and possibly more. Investigators started to think the eyewitness killer was local. The knowledge of the area, the creek, the abandoned parking lot, it all pointed to someone who lived nearby or had lived nearby in the past. They began looking at sex offenders in the area, focusing on those with past charges, involving minors. They reviewed employment records, school staff, delivery drivers, and even utility workers. Dozens of men were brought in for questioning. Backgrounds were checked, alibis verified. Still, nothing stuck. One suspect emerged briefly, a man who had once lived 2 streets away from the Hagermans and drove a black pickup. He had a record, but not for anything violent, just petty theft and drug possession. After days of surveillance and questioning, he was cleared. The truck had been sold months before Amber's abduction. It was another dead end. Attention turned back to the community itself. Police quietly speculated that the killer may have inserted himself into the search efforts. It was a chilling idea. That the same person helping hand out flyers or offering food to searchers might have been the one responsible. That he could have stood in the crowd during Amber's vigil, watching the candle flames flicker, completely unnoticed. The investigations. Momentum slowed. Public pressure increased. The media questioned the police's strategy. The town, once united in grief, began to fracture under the strain. Everyone wanted answers, but all the detectives had was a growing list of maybes and a killer who had vanished as completely as Amber had. With weeks turning into months and no new leads in Amber's case, the investigation was slowly fading into the background. Other stories began to dominate the news. The posters of Amber that had once papered every street corner were now torn or sun-bleached, a sad echo of a tragedy that had shaken an entire town. But behind closed doors, detectives continued combing through every detail, every record, every piece of Amber's short life. It was during one of these routine reviews that an officer stumbled upon something unusual, something tucked away in a box of personal items collected from Amber's bedroom shortly after her disappearance. Inside a drawer was a folder, labeled, in big block letters, Private. It was filled with hand-drawn pictures, short stories, and lists that only a child could have created. But one page stood out. At the bottom of the stack was a lined notebook sheet titled, Creepy People. On it were 3 names. 2 were crossed out. The last name, left untouched, was written in clear handwriting. Mr. Davin. The name didn't ring any immediate bells, but further digging revealed he had once worked as a substitute teacher at Amber's former elementary school. A soft-spoken man in his early 40s, Davin Harper had no criminal record. Nothing about him had raised suspicion during the initial stages of the investigation, but a deeper background check told a different story. Davin had moved frequently over the past 10 years, rarely staying in one place more than a year. In each school district he worked, there had been quiet complaints. Nothing official, just vague concerns from students and whispers from parents. Inappropriate stares, uncomfortable comments, a reputation for being off. But without any concrete allegations, he had slipped through the system again and again. At the time of Amber's disappearance, Davin had been renting a basement apartment less than half a mile from the Hagerman home. He had since moved out, disappearing just days after Amber's body was discovered. The timing was suspicious. Even more alarming, rental records showed he had used a truck-sharing service 2 days before Amber vanished and returned the vehicle 1 day after her body was found. The truck matched the general description given by the eyewitness. Older, black, with no identifiable license plate in the rental documentation due to temporary dealer tags. Detectives obtained a warrant for his former residence and searched it thoroughly. Inside, they found scraps of fabric, children's books, and a map of the town with several locations marked, including the creek. But Davin was gone. His bank account had been emptied, his phone disconnected. No friends, no family, no trace. It was as though he had anticipated being found and vanished before anyone could stop him. An arrest warrant was issued, and his face was broadcast nationwide, but no confirmed sightings ever came. Years passed. Tips dried up. And while Davin Harper remains the strongest suspect ever connected to Amber Hagerman's murder, he was never found. Justice slipped through the cracks. Amber's case remains officially unsolved. A tragedy frozen in time, a name that launched a national alert system, a life taken in just 8 minutes, and a killer who may still be watching from the shadows.